Welcome back to Brojo Online. Today we're going to be talking about how to overcome fear and in particular social anxiety. Confidence is basically about outwitting irrational fear and your insecurities. It's about having the wisdom to see past limitations in your brain that are not helpful and to know workarounds for those limitations so that you can make progress and grow. So in this episode, we're basically going to be looking at how you can be smarter than your fear and be the master of it, and so that fear works with you rather than against you. We're going to be looking at a few topics to cover this. We're going to be looking at how bravery is not the absence of fear, and that fear is going to be part of your life when you're brave. We're going to look at something I call fear mongering. We're going to look at how your brain controls you with manipulation and how that fear is not actually got your best interests in heart and is trying to prevent you from doing things that are actually helpful. We're going to look specifically at social courage, or the courage to be disliked, because if you've got that courage, basically all of your options are open because there's not many more fears other than social phobias. We're going to have a look at the difference between confidence and arrogance and why the fear of being arrogant or not humble is what actually holds a lot of people back. Then I'm going to end with some what you might call confidence quotes. I'm going to give you some mimetics, some phrases and questions that you can use in real life and in real time to prompt you into brave action so we can make all of this practical. Now, the way I script my podcast or make my notes is with the idea of breaking it up into a series of videos. So you will feel that kind of chunkiness as we go through, the 4 or 5 different chunks that are actually separate videos or going to be separate videos on their own. And of course, I'll be making my pitch for coaching periodically throughout the podcast, one for each of the videos. So hopefully that doesn't bother you too much, but hey, I am here to promote my business. Bravery is not the absence of fear. This is pretty old school wisdom. A lot of people who want to be brave and more courageous, they think that means they're not going to experience fear sensations. They're going to be fearless. And though they might not put it out there exactly like this, they're kind of dreaming of being permanently fearless, of not having any experience of anxiety or fear or panic or terror or anything like that. But this is basically impossible and not particularly helpful. Even if you could be fearless, it's incredibly dangerous. Fear does serve a vital survival function. It's just that most of the fears, especially the ones we'll be talking about in this episode, are irrational. They're not helpful. You're afraid of things that aren't actually dangerous. And in that noise, you're actually not afraid of the things that are dangerous. So fear is very helpful. And this is more about getting fear sorted out than it is about removing fear. But fearlessness is psychopathic. Fearless people are absolutely oblivious to consequences of their actions. I mean, fear is really a kind of foresight for what might happen and whether or not that thing is going to be harmful. And just because fear is inaccurate a lot of the time about that and gives you sensations of danger when there is none, doesn't mean that fear is unhelpful. I've met fearless people, the top criminal psychopaths in New Zealand. They all end up in jail, right? They all end up in prison. Everybody hates them eventually. They get lots of injuries and brain damage because they're not subject to any kind of fear of anything. They have no sensibility. There's also a disease, I'm going to mispronounce this, Urbach-White disease. I don't know how you say it. Very, very rare disease where somebody is basically fearless. And those people get injured a lot and they get into a lot of trouble. You think you want to be James Bond, the psychopath who has no fear. But without that, you have no connection to the real world. You have no sense of consequences. It's impossible to actually desire anything because you have no fear of loss. You don't really appreciate anything. You have no gratitude. You don't want to be fearless. You just want to be able to overcome fear when it comes up, especially when it's irrational. Now, most people see bravery as a kind of force or a strength, the ability to push through something that is scary. They see the fireman running through the burning building, running through the fire that burns them, that symbolism there, that's bravery, this pushing through of pain. And that is one way to be brave. And if you're particularly lucky with your genetics, you'll have that kind of innate bravery where you just run into things that scare you. But it's actually not the way you need to do things. I want you to start thinking of bravery and courage as being more about wisdom and intelligence, the kind of military intelligence that wins a battle when you're outnumbered, rather than pure strength and force, rather than brutality. The first element of this intelligence is to identify if it is indeed fear that you're experiencing. Sometimes fear doesn't come up as being afraid, it doesn't come up as this obvious emotional state. Sometimes it comes up as various forms like distractions and rationale and arguments and woe is me stories and narratives, and it doesn't actually feel like you're particularly afraid. And then once you've identified whether or not fear is happening, which I hope to help you do, the next level of intelligence is to figure out whether or not this fear is helpful. Is this fear actually preventing harm? Is it stopping you from going into a objectively dangerous situation? Or is it actually stopping your growth? Is it harming you itself? Is the barrier that is fear the thing you really should be afraid of? You think of the difference between you walk around a corner and you see a lion that's escaped from the zoo, that kind of fear. And you walk around a corner and you have the same sort of fear seeing a girl that you've got a crush on walking towards you. Now, those are clearly not both the same level of danger. In fact, the lion is incredibly dangerous and your fear is quite rational and you should respond to it. And the fear you have about going up and talking to your crush is completely irrational. It's very unlikely that that person is going to be of any danger to you whatsoever. You've got to understand that fear is not objectively interested in your safety. We think we feel afraid and we feel a repulsion away from something, that thing must be dangerous just because we feel afraid of it. Our brain at some level has assessed the thing as a threat, but a threat to what? Not safety, familiarity. Your fear only really cares about one thing, keeping shit the same. You ever wonder why somebody stays in an abusive relationship or a crappy job, or they keep hurting their health with the way they eat? If fear is designed to keep you safe, why aren't they afraid of doing those things? Why aren't they afraid of doing those clearly harmful, dangerous things? Because fear's priority is not physical safety. Fear's priority is to make sure you keep doing what you already know, to keep things the same. It has a great evolutionary basis. You know, back when we were in the middle of the food chain, keeping things the same, once you're onto a good thing, you stick with a good thing because, you know, resources were scarce and there were threats all around. But these days, it's actually a very harmful approach. So when familiar is bad for you, you must override the desire to stay familiar. And what that means in real life is when you're afraid of something, there's a good chance that that is simply a positive change. It would be an upgrade in your life or lead to an upgrade. And you're afraid of it simply because it's different. That is not the same as it being a threat. If you can get that intelligence through your head, that's half your courage problem solved. If you can see, hey, I'm scared of this, but it's not actually dangerous, it's good for me. My fear is misfiring because it's trying to keep shit the same all the time. I shouldn't take my fear as a piece of evidence that this is dangerous. Then you're well on your way to being brave. Bravery is taking an action that increases the sensations of fear. Right? That's bravery. But in particular, the difference between bravery and, say, foolhardiness or recklessness is that the action is helpful to you. So bravery is taking a helpful action that gives you fear sensations and increases the fear sensations you've already been having. That's all bravery is, right? It's not fearlessness, it's actually more fear than usual. However, bravery is also the mental process, the intelligence of breaking down something that you're afraid of with rational sort of skepticism to reduce your fear sensations, to show yourself that something is not dangerous, to outwit your fear and prove it wrong. Think of it as unpacking irrational insecurity. You have a false belief about something that says it's dangerous, and in order to be braver, you need to weaken that belief with evidence. The more you see that something is actually safe, the more you're likely to do it, the less afraid you'll feel, but you're still going to be uncomfortable because it's new. Right? You'll never get rid of that level of discomfort. Your brain is always going to be uncomfortable with changing the way you do things, with becoming a different person. There's no escaping that. Even if you're someone who changes things a lot, that's actually your comfort zone. So maybe staying the same and committing to something is what will make you uncomfortable. That would be the act of bravery, right? A change in who you are. The simplest trick for overcoming fear, if you learn nothing else from my work, this is the simplest one. Reduce the pressure by reducing the size of the task, right? If what you're asking of yourself causes too much panic and terror for you to follow through on it, reduce what you're asking of yourself until you can actually act. As long as it's only slightly uncomfortable, you're being brave. That's all that's needed for bravery. Think of the incremental compounding effect of you're always slightly uncomfortable. I don't mean all the time, but every day you're doing something that's just a little bit, you'd rather not, you usually don't, but it's not terrifying. It's not like you can't do it. You don't have a panic attack at the thought of it. You're just like, oh, you just kind of got to push yourself a little bit to do it. If you did that for years, you're going to become an incredibly brave person. You're going to be scared of almost nothing. So what you're looking for is the highest tolerable level of discomfort that you can handle today, right here, right now. For example, let's say I see my crush walking towards me, and my fear and its attempt to discourage me actually tells me, go up and talk to her and make her your girlfriend, right? I'm just going to have a panic attack at that thought if I'm a socially anxious person. So I've got to tell myself, all right, that's too much. But I've got to do something, so bring it down. Could I just say hi to her? No, I'm choking up. Even that's too much. Okay, just make eye contact. All right, made eye contact. Normally I'd walk past with my eyes down, so I'm going to make eye contact. Make eye contact. Oh, maybe I'll throw on a smile. Okay, good enough. That's all I can handle today. My heart's pounding enough as it is. If you can master the art of kind of changing the level of the task until you can actually do it, and it's at least some tiny amount of progress, some tiny amount of change, that's all. Don't let fear trick you into thinking you've got to do more than that. Fear's favorite technique is to ask so much of you that you do nothing at all. That's what it really wants, is nothing at all. So you always ask so little of yourself that you'll definitely do something. But it has to be at least uncomfortable. It has to be beyond what you would usually do. Anything beyond what you'd usually do is progress. And all you're looking for is progress. And then through these incremental increases, you're going to desensitize yourself. Right? This is what exposure therapy really is all about. You're going to slowly up the ante as you get comfortable with each level. It's always going to feel about the same amount of discomfort to move up because you're going to get used to the new baseline. You know, you might think asking a girl out is terrifying now, but one day it'll only be as uncomfortable as making eye contact with her. And then asking her to marry you will only be as uncomfortable as asking her out was, and so on. You're going to incrementally move up towards these things. You choose a new level, you stick with it until you can handle it. Okay, making eye contact is pretty easy for me now. Now I'm going to start saying hi. Wait until that's easy for you. Now I'm going to start introducing myself. And you just build up like that. You can also combine this with what I call walking meditation. So for those of you who are familiar with mindfulness meditation, usually you're sitting by yourself in a room with your eyes closed. Walking meditation is you pay intense attention to what's currently happening in a real life setting. So for example, let's say I'm scared of going to say hi to someone. I'm going to focus intently on the feeling of my feet hitting the pavement as I walk towards her. I'm like corralling my attention. I'm putting a leash on it and say, pay attention to this now. And keep bringing it back. When it starts going, oh, what if she says no? How do my feet feel? What does the sun feel like on my forehead? Where's my breathing right now? If you can combine this ability to keep refocusing on something that's currently happening, just look at something. You might count the leaves on a tree. You might smell the air. You might feel the feet on the pavement. Anything that just keeps bringing your attention back to now, because fear only really works with the future. It catastrophizes forward. So if you're present now, you're going to have the least amount of fear that's possibly available. And it's also going to help you see if anything's actually happening. Your fear says, oh my God, this is a disaster. And you're like, I'm just walking on the pavement. What do you mean disaster? There's nothing happening. As soon as something happens, I'll run away, I promise. But nothing's actually happening yet, so I'm going to keep going. And you have this kind of argument with your fear, like, I'm just going to bring my attention back to the present. Still no danger. Okay, I'll keep going. Bring my present attention back. Still no danger. Keep going. Until there's danger, I'm going to keep going with this little task I've set for myself. So if you think of bravery as your ability to desensitize yourself to uncomfortable little changes, then you've mastered what it becomes to be a brave person. Put that into practice every day. You'll discover what being courageous is really all about. You don't need to be fearless, just a little bit uncomfortable. And of course, if you want support to massively accelerate your progress with this and become a brave person very quickly, get in touch, dan@brojo.org, and we'll talk through some strategies. Let's talk about fear mongering. This is the term I like to give to the process where your irrational fears manipulate you to keep you under control. In a similar way that politicians and so on might do to manage a population, to govern, your mind does this with you. It governs you by fear mongering. First thing I want you to think of is the difference between helpful and unhelpful fear, as I've mentioned before. Helpful fear is rational for your quality of life. It's being afraid of the right things to be afraid of, things that will harm you, things that will slow you down and limit you, things that might kill you. That is what we'd call helpful fear. It's helpful that I'm afraid enough to check both ways before I cross the street. It's helpful that I would rush into a building, lock the door behind me if I saw a mob with weapons marching down the street. But unhelpful fear is when I'm afraid of something and my reaction to that fear actually makes my life worse. I'm afraid of going for the job opportunity, so I don't go for it. That makes my life worse. I'm afraid of the hassle of trying to figure out how to eat healthy, so I just keep eating unhealthy. That makes my life worse. If your fear leads you to behaviors that actually reduce your quality of life or miss the opportunity, kind of opportunity cost of increased quality of life, we'd call that unhelpful fear. One way to think about it is your fear is thousands and thousands of years old in terms of evolution. It doesn't always line up with modern day life. It sometimes misfires. It behaves as if you're still on the African plains fighting against lions when actually you're just reading an email from your boss. When that happens, it's going to need a manual override. You're going to have to see that it is manipulating you. You feel like fear controls you with force, especially when you feel afraid, right? When you feel terror or panic, you'll feel like you're actually being held back physically. But you've got to understand fear cannot hold you back physically unless it actually makes you pass out. Anything less than passing out from fear, fainting, you are still in control of your faculties. You're still able to move physically and talk. You might not be your highest level of performance, but it's still possible. But what fear needs to do is trick you into thinking that it's not. Fear's greatest trick is to make you think you have no control, make you think that this is an act of force. If you believe it, then you'll behave according to that belief and it will come true. If you're like, I can't talk to him, I'm too afraid, you'll actually make it true that fear held you back. But if you're like, I'm really afraid of talking to her, but then I'll walk towards her anyway, you'll see that your feet still move and that it was all an illusion. It's like they talk about in Game of Thrones, power is shadows on the wall. It's not real. But if you believe the shadows and you react to them, you make it real. So now I'm going to talk about some of those shadows. If you can see past these and outmaneuver them and outthink them, then you are free. Okay? Fear is your only real prison, irrational fear in particular. If you can work past irrational fear, then nothing really holds you back. The idea that anything outside you holds you back is an illusion. You've seen enough exceptions of your life of people doing impossible things to know that there must be an illusion of restraint here, that we're not really held back by anything other than ourselves. The main tactic you've got to be watching out for with fear is the delay tactic. Pretty much everything I'm about to talk about serves the single purpose of delay. Anything that stops you doing the thing right now. That's all fear needs to do. You think about it, it's the perfect strategy. If I'm a master of stopping you from doing something right now, that's all I'm a master of. But I also have the endurance to keep reapplying the strategy anytime I need to, then you'll never do it. You want to exercise? If I can just tell you start tomorrow, every day, you'll never exercise. It's a brilliantly simple strategy. You got to remember, fear is just trying to keep you familiar. It's trying to keep you the same, not safe. It's not interested in your growth. In fact, it's quite afraid of growth. It's afraid of success. Fear doesn't want success or growth because that means massive change. It means unfamiliarity, confusion, struggling, starting again from the bottom. Fear's got no interest in any of that. So if it can delay any positive changes, even for a few minutes, but also has the endurance to do it again the next time you think about it, then you never get started. And all of the tactics I'm about to describe are all just delay tactics. My favorite one that comes up a lot is what I call the Everest effect. Okay, the idea that you have to climb Mount Everest right away or otherwise nothing counts. It's also what I call false encouragement. Okay, fear quite often doesn't look like fear. It doesn't feel like you're afraid. And one of its worst, most powerful tactics is it looks like it's on your team. It looks like a cheerleader. It says, go for it. Do it all. Do it perfectly. Smash the whole thing out in your first ever attempt. Go be like a black belt in your first class. It sounds like it's trying to push you to do it, but actually what it's doing is making the task so intimidating, making the achievement such a high level of impossibility that you won't even move an inch towards it. It doesn't even want you to take a step towards base camp. It doesn't want you on the mountain at all. But the trick is to make you think you've got to do the whole mountain. So whenever you feel the pressure to be a master of something right out of the gate, to be perfect in your first draft, to get it right and no risk of getting it wrong, but it feels like your brain's like, go do it, but do it perfectly awesome and do the whole thing all at once with no in-between steps, or even just pushing lots of tasks together, like go get a degree, as if that is just one single action. And I'm like, wait, you haven't even like looked at the courses that are available. That's a tiny action on its own. You haven't even gone and have a meeting with the dean to see how you get into the course. That's a little action on its own. Like the idea that getting a degree is one thing, no, that's the Everest effect, to make it look a single step as a mountain. The solution to this is quantum parts courage, okay? Break down whatever it is that it's asking you to do until its tiniest first step, and then only have the obligation to do that tiny first step. You just have to research courses to see if there's any you like, and no further obligation after that. You don't have to get a degree. You don't have to get married and have kids. You just need to make eye contact with that girl at the dance class. That's it. And after that, you can reassess what you want to do. Your ability to take the massive mountain and turn it into a single step is how you outwit the Everest effect. Remember, if it feels like encouragement, but you don't actually move, then it's not really encouragement, isn't it? It's discouragement. The next one is what I call the avalanche threat. It's a type of catastrophizing. This is where your fear projects into the future that if you take even a tiny little step, even an experimental, tiny exploratory movement, the door will slam shut behind you, you won't be able to get back through, and there'll just be this cascading domino effect avalanche of disastrous consequences. Like you can't even step without ruining your whole life. What it'll do is extrapolate on the tiny move that you're thinking about doing and make it look like it's chained to these other consequences, and you won't be able to back out once the process has started. It's like you imagine, oh, I want to go try that new dance class. But it's like, yeah, once you try the new dance class, you're going to suck at dancing. Everybody's going to talk about it. It's going to be spread around the whole world that you're this dancer. All your friends are going to leave you. Your job's going to have to let you go because you got all this negative feedback, and now you're homeless and alone. There's this thing where like you can't even like back out if it sucks. Or a lot of people get this one with relationships. They'll be like, I can't ask her out because what if she likes me and then we end up in a relationship, but I don't actually like her that much, but I can't break up with her. So I end up getting married and divorced, and she takes me for half of what I've got because I just can't leave. This idea that you're not allowed to go back through the door you just came through, that it's permanently shut and sealed behind you, it's a lie. Isolated, no obligation experiments. That's the solution to this. Everything you do has no obligation to continue, and you're allowed to cut it off and run back through the door if it goes terribly wrong. You're allowed to quit. You're allowed to put your hand up and go, hey, I was wrong about this. It's not the right move. I made a mistake. You're allowed to break up with someone and it turns out they're not the favorite person to be with. You're allowed to end things at any point. There's no compulsion. Just because you've started something doesn't mean you have to finish it. Let go of that bullshit conditioning from early school years that quitters are losers or something like that. No, excellent people quit. Quitting is a key element to success. You have to quit things that aren't going well and aren't on track as soon as possible. So let go of the idea that you're not allowed to quit, because that's just your fear trying to stop you from starting. Another more classic form of catastrophizing is the what-if technique. And this is where your brain goes off on an imagination tangent of just blowing up the potential consequences of your actions with very little to no evidence whatsoever. I've never seen catastrophizing happen by an expert in their field, right? They don't catastrophize about what's going to happen in the thing that they're very knowledgeable about. People only catastrophize with shit that they've got almost no experience with and no real education with. Or they might have only had bad experiences, but they've only ever tried it like one way. So somebody might be scared of getting into a relationship because they've only been in like 3 abusive relationships, but they don't actually have experience of a wide range of people. They just keep hooking up with the same idiots every time. This is where I'd actually employ a thought stopping technique. Okay, one of my clients does this. He just keeps a rubber band around his wrist, and as soon as the what ifs start, he just snaps that rubber band, nice little sharp ping on the wrist, does no permanent injury, and just says, stop it. I don't know, so stop. Stop imagining stuff. Now, you might have to do this multiple times, sometimes per minute, but this thing where catastrophizing just simply isn't allowed. Your brain is not allowed to imagine stuff that it does not have relevant expertise in. It's not allowed to imagine consequences when it hasn't done extensive trial and error experimentation. Right? It's like a scientific method. It's not allowed to draw conclusions when there hasn't even been a study yet. So every time it starts going, well, what if this happens? Just go snap. You don't even answer the question, what if this happens? You don't even try to solve that problem. You just snap. I'm not allowed to think about that. Right? This is not planning. Worrying is not planning. Now, if it raises something like, what if that happens and that's a legitimate threat, then have a plan to minimize that threat and keep moving forward anyway. But if it's just throwing what if questions at you to stop you moving forward, snap that rubber band. Or slap yourself in the face. That's what I do. Another technique is rewarding promises with exemptions. You actually get a dopamine rush when you promise something. When you promise a positive change to yourself or others, especially to others, when you say, I'm going to hit the gym on Monday, and they're like, good for you. And you're like, oh my God, that feels awesome. I feel like I've actually been to the gym. You start to think, well, do I even need to go now that I feel this good? I'm not actually that motivated. I'm not feeling the crisis I was feeling before. So fear will give you a nice little dopamine hit when you promise to make a change, just so long as you don't actually follow through. You're allowed to make as many promises as you like. You'll know someone who's a chronic promise breaker, someone who constantly, has ideas about how they're going to change and make their life better and never follows through. You don't realize they're like a drug addict. Every time they promise something, it's like they have a hit and they feel good again. And that's why they never change, because it's the promises they're addicted to. They're not actually interested in changing. No more promises. Take the action or don't. Take it right now or not at all. So it's not like I'll start exercising on Monday. Drop and do 10 push-ups right now. I don't care if you're in the bathroom. If you want to exercise right now. Do some tiny version of the thing that you're planning on doing right here, right now. That's a commitment. The only thing you're allowed to reward is behavior. You cannot reward anticipated behavior. You cannot reward the idea of taking an action. You either took the action or you didn't. Reward and punish accordingly. The repetition compulsion. This is a human trait that I've only been made aware of lately, but it's really prevalent. We like to repeat something that we've done in the past because of sunk cost fallacy. We have this idea that if I just keep repeating it, it will eventually work. And fear loves this promise. Look, just keep doing the same thing and eventually you'll get a different result. So this way you get to feel like you're pursuing a different result, but fear is actually getting what it wants, and that is you're not changing your behavior. So you've got to have a rule that if you're ever repeating something, your attempt must change in some way. Your methodology must change in some way. Okay, like let's say you're going to the gym and no matter what, how much you work out, you're not making improvements. You must adjust your workout a little bit. You must adjust your nutrition a little bit. You must talk to an expert and get some feedback on what you're doing. You're not allowed to just repeat what you did for the last month or 2 months or 3 months that didn't get any results. Make a rule with yourself. If something's been going for a while and you're not getting positive changes, you do not repeat it, not without at least some significant adjustment. Vicarious trauma. This is where we're afraid of something because bad things happen to other people, at least we perceived it that way, right? We get people who be like, oh, I don't want to start my own business because Bill started his business and now he's bankrupt. As if you've been made bankrupt from starting a business. It's like, I'm just going to have that experience internally, so I don't need to have it externally. So fear likes to say, look, what will happen to other people is going to happen to you, and your perception of what happened to other people is accurate. And neither of those things are true. What you can do is you can have a conversation with your fear. You can say, look, bad things did happen to other people who are trying what I'm about to try. So let's learn from it. Let's find out why bad things happen to that person and do what we're going to do a little bit differently so it doesn't happen that way. Bill's business tanked. Ask him why. What happened, mate? Oh, you spent too much, right? You spent more than you were making? Okay, well, when I run a business, the rule is I can't spend more money than I make. Problem fucking solved. One of the most subtlest and devious tactics of fear is to undermine your past by negatively cherry-picking evidence. So your fear will conveniently overlook the fact that you've survived up until now, which means you must have done most things good enough. Notice that? The reason you're watching this and you're not living in a ditch, drinking methylated spirits, or not lying in the ground dead, is because you've done most things right in your life, at least right enough. And yet you think about your past, you're like, I'm such a fucking loser, I always fail, I'm never good at anything. What evidence are you basing that on? How do you manage to convince yourself that you're not good enough when you're clearly good enough, right? Well, what your fear does is it cherry picks evidence, moments in time that you felt were a failure or that didn't go the way you planned, or even worse, it takes something that actually met the goals criteria, and then after it's done, changes the criteria and says that wasn't enough, right? It just makes whatever looked like a success back then into a failure now because the bar is set higher. Most of our fear problem is actually the way we measure ourselves and measure our past. Accurate journaling is the solution to this. You should every day be tracking your wins, and you've got to acknowledge the things that you've become complacent about. Did you get to work on time? That's a win. Did you eat and take care of your hygiene enough to survive through to tomorrow? That's actually a win. It might not have been the best eating. You might not be the cleanest person in the world. Your job might not be the best job anyone's ever had. But the fact that you're still going and still surviving, these all count as wins. And when you notice that, you'll realize that your failures are relatively rare. It's very rare that you don't do something to the point where you're actually harmed. Right? Most of the time, even if it was a struggle and emotionally turbulent, you got through it, you survived. You might feel like you're really useless with money, but are you in jail for fraud right now? Right? Are you homeless? Are you begging? If not, maybe you're all right with money. Maybe not the best, but good enough. Look at what's actually happening with you. Measure it properly. Give yourself props when you're doing well, and then start to change the story about who you are so that you can trust yourself with future endeavors. A couple more that fear does. One of them is what I call the research hole. It tells you don't know enough yet to take an action, so go do more research. And thanks to things like Wikipedia and YouTube and online courses, people can get into holes of research where they just stuff their head full of information. They feel like they're making progress, but their life is exactly the same as before they started. They haven't done anything differently. You counter this by making a rule. You can only do research after an action. The only time you're allowed to look up the best way of doing something is after you've already made an attempt and you've got some actual feedback to work with. You want to know the best move in jiu-jitsu? Go to a class, do the class first, get beaten in the rolling afterwards, figure out why you were beaten, and then go find a video on how to deal with that problem, and then go apply it to the next class. It should go action, research, not research, action. Any kind of starting position. Do the thing first, and then figure out a better way of doing it, and then keep taking action. And of course, the classic one, the invisible one that rules most people's lives, is just the time sink distractions. Just the minutes and the seconds that add up to hours and weeks and months over your lifetime of you doing shit that just doesn't matter, but feeling like it's important. One of the best things fear can do to stop you from doing change is make the to-do list of stuff that needs to be kept the same so big that there's not enough time to do more. If you think of those people that do amazing things with their lives, like I saw one guy the other day, he's been a doctor, an astronaut, and a military officer all in one lifetime. Think, well, how does he, with 24 hours a day, do so much when most people do so little? How does somebody learn 9 different languages when most people barely master their fucking original language? Well, they don't waste time. It's as simple as that. You could do the same amount. They're not geniuses necessarily. They're just extremely efficient. Stop treating your whole to-do list as if it's all equally important. Start learning about things like the Pareto principle. Start applying what matters most up front and letting things go at the end. Usually, whatever your current positive change action needs to be should be the first thing you do right after breakfast. Okay? It might even be the breakfast itself being changed. Anything else that needs to be done, anything that just keeps life the same, happens after you've done your growth moves. If you reverse the order, like uncomfortable growth second and boring shit first, no, if you reverse that, your life will absolutely change. And overall, the key thing to keep in mind is that any delay on a positive change action should be viewed with suspicious skepticism. As soon as you're putting something off that you know is good for you, that you know you should be doing, you should become immediately very suspicious. Am I being manipulated by fear right now? Is this bullshit? And what's the tiny action I can do right now to make sure at the very least this isn't being delayed entirely? If you know you're supposed to be doing your tax return, at least fill out one line on the form before procrastinating another day. All right, make it that you can never look at the thing without taking some small action. And that way, you're at least not delaying. And then you're really a master of overcoming fear. Of course, if you want to accelerate your progress with becoming a brave and courageous person and learn more about these mastery techniques, get in touch, dan@brojo.org, and I'll walk you through some strategies. Let's talk about the courage to be disliked. I think the top fears that control us are the social ones, the phobias, the anxieties relating to abandonment and ostracism, being embarrassed and humiliated, even violence, a bad reaction from other people. Fear reverse engineers those outcomes like embarrassment and humiliation and comes to the conclusion that any form of dislike or disapproval is a massive threat because it could lead to those outcomes. So it makes two assumptions. One is that those outcomes are definitely bad and harmful, and the other is that any form of disapproval will lead and escalate to those outcomes. And so it starts to see being disapproved of and being disliked as this huge threat, as this dangerous situation. So it starts to notice that dislike and disapproval are really emotional states, what I call the disses. Disapproval, disappointment, disgust, disagreement, dislike. All these disses start to become the focal point of this fear. How do we prevent these emotional states from happening in other people? I don't know about you, but it was incredibly painful for me to acknowledge that most of my life decisions, including huge decisions like what I did for a career and who I hung out with and where I lived, were based primarily on preventing these emotions from happening in people. That I was a slave to this fear of just avoiding dislike, that I'd choose huge parts of my life dedicated to just preventing those emotions. What a waste. What a waste of a life. If you can tolerate the risk of being disliked and tolerate the actual event of being disliked, of people having those disses emotions, then you're free. Your opportunities expand 1,000-fold. There's so much more you can do with your life if you're free from being controlled by this fear. Now, it doesn't mean you have to become fearless. As I've talked about before, bravery is not the absence of fear. You can still be afraid of the consequences of people disliking you. But if you can go ahead and accept those consequences and let them happen, then your range of options just explodes and your life goes from a limited prison to just an open wilderness where anything can happen. So in my mind, there really is no fear that's more important to overcome for your quality of life than the fear of what other people will think of you. Notice the link your mind makes where it thinks any form of dislike or disapproval equals harm. Right? You react to it viscerally. Oh my God, they're going to judge me. As if something bad's going to happen when they do. When's the last time you challenged this? When's the last time you said, okay, well, what will happen? Where are the injuries? Exactly. Now, some of you will have actual experiences. You'll have, a bad childhood where being disliked got you bullied and beaten up and everything like that. And so you'll believe that that's going to happen again. But you're an adult now, living in an adult world. Is this still true? Is it still true that being even slightly disapproved of, or having someone slightly disagree with you, or having someone a bit disgusted by your opinion will actually hurt you physically? That it's actually something you can't endure? When's the last time you challenged that belief? Because I'll tell you right now, I get hate every day. No injuries. No scars, not even a bruise. So if you're so sure that being disapproved of and disliked will lead to harm, why am I unharmed? Read my YouTube comment section. Why am I unharmed? When someone feels one of those disses around you, and even though you try to prevent it from happening, it still happens occasionally. What actually happens most of the time? I mean, right now, even if you're a total people pleaser and you do your best to make people like you, there's somebody out there, somebody you know and work with or hang out with, who hates the fact that you're a people pleaser. They disapprove of that. They just like you for it. What injuries have you incurred as a result of that? I mean, no matter how much of a good person you think you are, there are people out there who don't like you. There are people out there who disagree with you. You interact with them on a daily basis. There are people you walk by in the street and they just look at you and just go, ugh. And they might not even mention it to you, but that happens. You know it must happen because you do it to other people. Does it always result in total abandonment? Does it destroy all of your relationships permanently? Do you die or get injured? Does anything actually fucking happen most of the time? No. You just fear that something will happen. But most of the time you're fine. Put it this way, even if things have happened to you in the past, the fact that you're watching this video means it didn't kill you. Have you ever been disliked by someone who you actually really want to be in your life? And I don't mean for insecure reasons like you're desperate for love, but someone whose personality you actually really loved. How often does that happen when they've disliked you? I'm not saying it's hypothetical. It has happened to you. I've had people I like dislike me. But what I've found is that it's incredibly rare that someone who's a good fit for me, someone I really admire and respect, also has a lot of dis feelings towards me. Most of the time when somebody dislikes me and hates what I have to say and is disgusted by my opinions and stuff, when I look at that person objectively, I think I wouldn't really want them in my life either, frankly. I mean, the reason they feel those feelings is because we're so fucking different in our belief systems. I don't actually have a huge attraction towards keeping that person in my life. Now, there was a time when I did feel that kind of need to keep people in my life, but it wasn't because they had a great personality. It's just because I was desperate for friends and love. If you remove that desperation, those people who dislike you, do you really care that they're not in your life? Are you actually, if you had people who loved you for who you were, if you had a tight circle of people who approved of everything you said, would you need to include this person as well? Or could you live without them? If being liked is so important to you, just think of this. If only 0.1% of the world liked you and approved of you, that would be 75,000 people. I want you to just take a moment to think of how long it would take you to meet and get to know 75,000 people. You couldn't do it. You couldn't do it in a lifetime. There is more people who like you in the world than you could possibly meet. Because I don't care how low your self-esteem is, you've got to admit at least 0.1% of people feel something positive towards you, right? And that's being really conservative. I don't care how much of a freak you are, the number's actually higher than that. But even if the number is that low, it's still too many people for you to meet in your entire life. So you're worried about a scarcity of total abandonment? If you're busy meeting lots of people, you're going to find that 0.1%. And you only need to find 3 or 4 people to have an awesome social circle. So everybody else can dislike you as long as only a few don't. So what are you worried about? Notice that your fear is actually more about the real in-the-moment conflict. It's not so much people disliking you and you being abandoned. That's just the catastrophizing. What you're really afraid of is somebody actually expressing a diss to your face in the moment and having to handle that. Right? That's the thing you're actually so terrified of. And yet you've had that happen in your life. You've been around it when it's happened. You clearly didn't die from it. You clearly endured it and survived. It might have been very emotionally uncomfortable for you. But why was it emotionally uncomfortable for you? Did something actually happen to you? Or were you uncomfortable because you simply did not want this to happen to you? If someone throws lots of insults at me, but it was in Chinese and I don't know what they're saying, would I feel offended and hurt and rejected? No, I'll just feel a bit confused. I have to actually interpret what somebody says to me for me to be hurt by it, right? Especially when it's just words. So for someone to dislike me and that actually hurt me, it's something in my interpretation process that actually hurts me. I have to not want them to say stuff. I have to want them to say something else. And as long as I don't have those wants, I'm unaffected. One of my black clients, I asked him, if a member of the KKK thought that you were a dickhead, would that bother you? He said, no, of course not. I'm like, well, what difference does it make if one of your friends thinks you're a dickhead? I mean, if someone thinks you're a dickhead, what difference does it make who it is? It's just the story you tell yourself in your head. I want that person to like me. I don't care if that person does. What if you think, hey, if someone dislikes me, then that rules them out from my life? It's actually a helpful piece of information. No harm done. Of course, all of this won't make your fear go away. So let's get practical. Start small. Whatever level of disagreeableness that you currently sit at, just ramp it up a little bit. Just a tiny little bit that you feel that you can tolerate. Show a little bit more of your true opinions. Disagree a little bit more. Argue a little bit more than you usually would. Express opinions that you wouldn't usually express. Show preference for things that you would usually hide. It can be tiny. The example I often use is like all of your friends want to go out for Chinese food and you just say, I'd rather have pizza. Now, you might end up going for Chinese food, but just saying I'd rather have pizza, just being willing to rock the boat a little bit more than you usually do. A lot of this is about you showing the disses, you being disagreeable, disapproving, disgusted, disliking. You'll find that often people who are afraid of rejection are actually more afraid of rejecting. They're more afraid of delivering the disses than receiving them. They just tell themselves a story that they're afraid of rejection, but they're actually okay with not being liked. What they hate is being seen as someone who dislikes somebody else. So if you can just practice showing a little more of the disses yourself, the general topic of disagreeableness and disapproval, then you'll find that your tolerance for these level of emotions will slowly increase, and you'll realize they're not things to be afraid of, they're just uncomfortable. And if you're willing to endure that discomfort, you get more options in life, you get better quality of life. you get better friends, better job, you get to travel and try those things you've always wanted to try. You just have to pay the price of somebody going, as a reaction. That's it. That's fucking it. So your parents are disappointed that you dropped out of university. That's all they are, is disappointed. Nothing happens. They just sit there being disappointed, and you go off on a better career path. And that just sits like that, and that's it. You survive. If you realize that, like, you can't stop the disappointment from happening, but it doesn't actually hurt you as long as you're okay with it happening, you're free. You can start by choosing one person who you're actually okay with disliking you. If you can find that one person and commit to being fully honest with them, right? Let them dislike you just to train, just like a sparring dojo of some kind. So, okay, I know that person doesn't like me, so I'm going to go and talk to them and share my ideas on politics with them, just so I can spend some time being in the presence of someone who disapproves of me, right? Just training the endurance of that emotional state, right? It all pays off in the end. If you can endure the extreme discomfort of being hated by everyone in the room, then you are socially free. And that's how you find the room where everybody loves you. Express your preferences, but don't try to manage their reaction. Okay, when somebody is in one of the disses, you can see they disagree with you or they dislike you, just let them. All right, don't fight back. Don't try to change their mind or convince them. You don't have to keep arguing with them if you've hit your level of discomfort for the day and you're just like, that's enough. It's fine. You can even back down from the argument, but don't try to make them feel better about it. Don't try to change their mind. Just sit in that emotion. Think of it this way. At some point, they've got to go to lunch. At some point, they'll need to take a shit. They've got to sleep sometime. This is not going to last forever. Just endure it until they need to go do something else, and then it's over. Now, obviously, there isn't a single video or podcast out there that's just going to solve your fear on this. But if you work with me for an extended period of time, you can get to a place where this is really in the past for you. So get in touch, dan@brojo.org, and we'll talk about how to become someone who isn't afraid of what other people think of them. Confidence versus arrogance. A weird barrier that people have to becoming brave is they're worried about being too confident. They're worried about straying into the realm of what we call arrogance. And that actually stops them from developing any kind of courage or any kind of self-belief, because they think any kind of backing myself and going for it and upsetting other people is arrogance. You gotta understand, this is just the fear of social judgment disguising itself as some noble attempt at humility. When you say, look, I'm not going to be confident because I'm a good person, what you're really saying is, I'm terrified of what people think of me. And that's all you're saying. Arrogance is not confidence. Arrogance is a manifestation of the fear of being wrong. Confident people are okay with being wrong. Arrogant people are not. It's this distinguishing difference. Arrogance can look like confidence, but really it's just domination, aggression. It's a kind of fight. Confidence, you're not trying to dominate or be aggressive or try to fight anybody. Arrogance is thinking that you're better than somebody else. Confidence, you don't even compare to other people. Other people are their own business. It doesn't matter. When you're confident, you're measuring yourself based on your own core values and your behavioral alignment with those values. Other people are irrelevant. Arrogance, you're measuring yourself on status and dominance, and it's always about comparison and domination of other people. Arrogance might look like fearlessness, but it's actually a state of deep insecurity. All right, it's a state of permanent fear. You get actually like arrogant personality disorders, things like narcissistic personality disorder, some cases of borderline, where they're actually at such a constant state of fear that their fear reaction is their personality. Arrogance is a defense mechanism against the fear that you are actually worthless, that toxic shame that there's something wrong with you and that you're less than everybody else. Arrogance is a coping mechanism for that. So that I never have to face the fear that I'm worthless, I'll pretend that I'm worth more. Arrogance is a fragile ego identity. It's this thing where I must be seen as this or otherwise my whole world collapses. Whereas confidence is, I see me however you want to see me. I've got my own view of myself that I have to earn with my behavior. And if you still think I'm a dick after that, so be it. You go ahead and think that, because it's not a relevant measurement. You can see evidence when an arrogant person is challenged. They often become vicious, especially if you touch their sore spot. They will try to destroy the enemy rather than open themselves up humbly to the idea that they might be wrong or that they've got more to learn or that somebody else has a better idea than what they have, and so on. People worry that standing up for yourself is arrogance, but it's only arrogance if you refuse to back down when somebody has a better argument. Right? Standing up for yourself is confidence. It becomes arrogance when you hold that position regardless of the information you're receiving. Confident person will say, I believe this. Somebody else say, what about that? And you'll be like, fuck, that's a good point. Actually, I've changed my mind. Right? When arrogance is like, no, fuck you. I'm the one who's right. It's a completely different approach. When you argue with an arrogant person, they'll try to take you down rather than actually win the debate on merit. Right? They will attack you personally, that ad hominem attack. They won't admit to being wrong. They never want to lose face. They would rather die on the hill that's wrong than admit to it. They also choose their competition wisely. They only compete where they can win. You can see this in martial arts. The arrogant person will deliberately pick the person whose ass they're going to kick and choose their fights carefully so that they have an immaculate record. Whereas the confident person will be like, who's the toughest guy who's probably going to beat me because I need to learn some shit. Arrogant people lack humility and respect, right? They have no problem being inconsiderate towards others and harmful to others in the way that they do things. And this is more than just confidence. It's aggression. They will actively harm people where it's not necessary in order for the person to achieve their goals. They would rather destroy than cooperate. Confident people with high bravery are basically the opposite of arrogant. They respect others' opinions and they're open to having their mind changed as long as there's greater evidence and it's a better argument. People often think that being confident is being certain, being sure of yourself. No, it's backing yourself, but being totally open to the idea that you're probably wrong about everything. It's Socratic. You think the only thing I know for sure is that I know nothing for sure. So I'm always open to better ideas, but they need to be better ideas. I'm not just going to accept it because you disagree with me. Prove me wrong, and then I'll change my mind. Confident people are humble about whatever lack they have in skills or knowledge. They have no shame admitting to their limitations. But at the same time, they're not going to apologize for who they are. They're not going to apologize for their natural state. A white belt in jiu-jitsu is confident is not going to apologize for being a white belt. They're like, well, this is as far as I got so far, of course. Right? I've been in this for 3 months. What the fuck do you think I'm going to be? They're just going to be whatever they are. And they'll accept their limitations. But they're always trying to push. They're always trying to improve themselves. Right? They're always building. So they're humble, but not afraid of growth. That's what bravery really is, yeah, I kind of suck at this, but I'm going to keep working at it. I'm not going to apologize for sucking. This is the amount I'm going to be good at with this much practice. What did you fucking think was going to happen? They compete against tough opponents. They're looking to be the small fish in the big pond rather than the other way around. They'd rather withdraw, take it easy than squash a lesser opponent. Again, I like to use the jiu-jitsu example. I see the really confident purple belts will actually moderate how hard they go against a lesser belt to give that person a chance to learn some stuff. Whereas, say, an arrogant blue belt will just smash you and pin you and not give you a chance to even breathe because he's more worried about winning than he is about participating in some sort of cooperative way. Confident people understand respect, live and let live. As long as you don't harm me and my loved ones, I'm going to let you do whatever it is that you need to do. I'm not going to tell you how to live. I'm not going to try and dominate you. I'll be assertive, which means I won't let you cross my boundaries, but I won't be aggressive. I'm not going to cross your boundaries either. So being assertive, being brave in that way, means just holding the fort and not letting anyone harm you. Trying to control how other people live is aggression, and that's what arrogant people do. It's not the same as confident at all. And as I said earlier, confident people measure their behavior only against their own core values. Other people's behavior might be an inspiration and say, oh, that's a good idea, I'll try that. Or a lesson, like, oh, that worked out pretty badly, I'm not going to do that. But it's not a measurement system. It's not like, oh, I'm better than that person or worse than that person. The confident people have their own system of measurement of what's good behavior based on their life experience and their core values and their moral code. And that's what they're measuring against. Whether or not you make more money than them, they don't give a fuck. You can't be too brave or too confident or too shameless. Okay? Arrogance is none of those things. Confidence is not competence. Okay? It's not being good at something. You're allowed to be humble when you're confident. Right? You can say, I don't know. It's actually a very confident thing to say, especially in this day and age where everybody's a fucking expert on everything, right? To say, actually, I'm not an expert in shit. That's a confident thing to say. It's arrogant to say, I know everything. So keep working on your bravery. Keep becoming more assertive. As long as you're not aggressive, as long as you're only measuring your own core values and not trying to hurt others, as long as you consider how your behavior impacts others and make adjustments where it doesn't compromise your values, then you don't need to worry about being an arrogant person. Even if other people call you that and they have a problem with what you're doing, just revert back to your core values. Am I aligned with that? Good, okay. Then you can shut the fuck up. And if you want help to become more confident without becoming arrogant, get in touch, dan@brojo.org, and we'll talk through some ideas. Confidence quotes. Sometimes we just need little boosters, little practical notes in your pocket that get you through the day. So I want to share some, you might call them memes or memetics, that will help boost your confidence on a daily basis in real life situations, give you more courage in any given moment. I'll start with some questions that you can ask yourself throughout the day or in certain situations to prompt you to be more courageous. And then some statements, little things that you can remind yourself of throughout the day or again bring up in certain situations to kind of push you through a fear barrier. Here's my favorite question of all time. I made it up myself, and it was the key fundamental question that's prompted my self-development. What would a confident guy do right now? You can apply this in pretty much any fucking situation. And even if you're not really sure what a confident guy is, an answer will pop into your head. It might just be a theory kind of thing, a draft. But an answer will always pop up, a guess at least. And bravery would be to try and do that thing. Now, being wary that it might be asking too much, you can at least try a version of it. I remember one of the first times I asked myself this question back in my single days where I was trying to overcome my fear of talking to girls. I was in a shopping mall and I saw 3 really pretty girls talking. And I tried to ask myself, what would a confident guy do right now? And the answer was like that. He would go talk to them. Now, I didn't have the courage to go and talk to them on that day, but I at least made eye contact. I think I at least made eye contact or waved a little bit. Or at the very least, I knew what I would do if I was confident. I kind of set a goalpost. Like, okay, that's the kind of behavior I'm aiming for, at least at this time in my life. So this question, what would a confident guy do right now, kind of gives you a marker of where you're trying to get to personally. In a very practical way, what's the actual behavior I could do, the thing I could say right now? And anything you can do towards that, even if it's 10% of what it is, means you're being a brave person. You're lining up with being a brave person. So you ask yourself that question 10 times a day and try to answer it with a behavior, your confidence is going to skyrocket. Adding on to that, here's a slightly longer-winded question. What's the smallest and most realistic version of that action that I could attempt right now? So you're dreaming of doing something big and brave and bold, but you're intimidated by it. Usually that's fear trying to discourage you, what I call the Everest effect. It's make it look like you got to climb a mountain. But if you can just ask yourself this question to access quantum parts courage, to break the thing down to something manageable, just go, what's the smallest version of this I could actually do? You're thinking, man, I've been out of shape for 10 years. I want to get to the gym, work out, and so on. You're like, it's a bit too much to ask. Well, the smallest version is I could just put on my sneakers and just go for a walk around the block. I haven't been for a big walk in a while. I could at least just go for a walk, right? Or I could drop and do 10 push-ups. Or I could go to the gym with no obligation to do anything in particular. Maybe I just walk on the treadmill for 10 minutes and go home. Maybe I just do some stretches and then bail. As long as I just do some small version of this, anything more than 0 is progress. And then tomorrow I can ask the question again and see how much I can do. This is also a good way to get through momentary dips in courage. Like maybe you're having a rough time of the year and you just can't do as much as you used to. A lot of people in self-development talk about only measure, compared to your past self, but sometimes that's an unfair measurement because your past self was crushing it and you just don't have those resources today. So rather than trying to always beat your past, which is impossible, ask yourself, what am I capable of today? What small version of it? I want to work out, but I'm really sick. Could I at least eat healthy? What's the closest I can get to it today that I'll actually follow through? It's an incredibly helpful question to remain a brave person. What action would I be proud of tomorrow? One way to look at self-development and confidence building is service to your future self, trying to make their life better. Trying to do today what I'll be happy I did tomorrow and what I'll be fucking stoked I did 10 years from now. When I look at my coaching business, which has been running for 10 years now, and I think back to that Dan who handed in his notice at work to go full-time with coaching, I'm so fucking glad he did that. That was horrible for him, right? That just felt like he was stepping off a cliff. But he paid that price so that I've been able to do this for 10 years now. So I've got to think of myself 10 years from now. What I hope he wants. He wants to know that he spent quality time with his daughter and he's not going to regret missing the opportunity to connect with her. So every day, even though sometimes I'm too tired or it's a hassle or there's other things I want to do, I get down on the floor and I play with some Lego and I have fun with my daughter because I know 10 years from now I'll be like, fucking right on. I'm so glad you put that effort in. That was so much more important than the other shit you wanted to do. But the smallest version of this is just tomorrow's guy. You're just about to eat that chocolate bar and there's an apple sitting right there. What does tomorrow guy want you to do? Can you maybe just do what he wants instead of what you want? I mean, if you're already a people pleaser, make yourself the one you're pleasing, your future self. And then you can note it the next day like, fuck yeah, I'm so glad you ate that apple. Good on you, dude. And that is how you build self-worth. You're proud of your own behavior. Classic one is just, is this fear rational or imagined? So you're becoming a detached observer and just going, where am I getting this fear from? Is this from evidence? Is this a reasonable fear to have? Is this the kind of thing that causes lots of harm to people or myself? Or am I taking a big risk? You think about things that are objectively risky, like getting into a cage with a lion or base jumping or drinking bleach, right? These are things that no matter who you are, these are very dangerous things to do. And then you look at the thing that you're afraid of and go, where does it rank according to those things? Like you're afraid of applying for a promotion. Well, get on ChatGPT or Google and go, how many people died from applying for a promotion? Right? Actually have a look at how legit this fear is, how dangerous the thing is you're doing. Get some percentages going. Now, this might not necessarily help you overcome the fear, but a lot of overcoming fear is just not believing the story that the thing is dangerous. That's it. Just questioning that, not instantly believing every fucking thought you have as if it's just pure truth in there. So your brain goes, oh my God, that's scary. You go, why? What's going to happen? Is something real going to happen? Do I have evidence to back this up? Or am I just imagining that something might happen and there's really not a good case for that? My last question, which is particularly for building courage just generally, which option is the least comfortable? Whenever you do anything, if you do it the least comfortable way, there's some sort of bravery being built. You can have a warm shower or a cold shower. Now, both ways you get clean, but the cold shower is more uncomfortable. You could brush your teeth with your left hand instead of your right. It's slightly more uncomfortable. Anything especially that's emotionally uncomfortable. I could laugh at the guy's joke or show the fact that I didn't find it funny. Right? I could walk the nice long way to the shops. It's all sunny and nice and social. I can walk through the dark alley that I'm a little bit intimidated by, even though it's not really dangerous. Constantly trying to look for an uncomfortable option you could choose just to endure more discomfort, just to rack up some discomfort points. The more discomfort points you rack up, the braver you are. It's as simple as that. Let's finish with some statements. You can have these printed out somewhere. You can have them on your phone as little reminders, little things that prompt you to just get through tough times and be a little braver. The Stoic classic, this too shall pass. Whether you're having a good time or a bad time, it's like a cloud in the sky. It is not going to stay there forever. This has really helped me with things like confrontations and other conflict situations that I find really uncomfortable. Is there's no way this is going to last forever. Even there's a time where 4 guys were beating the shit out of me. They're not going to beat me up forever, right? They've got to go home at some point. And it did come to an end. It only lasted like half a minute. It was a pretty horrible 30 seconds to be sure, but it went away. And there's been great times too. You have an orgasm, this too shall pass. This idea that a lot of bravery is just endurance. It's just about not running away during an uncomfortable thing. And just knowing that, hey, if I can just stay still, the other thing will move on. If I just stay still, that cloud that's raining on me will slowly move on and piss off. Your boss is lecturing you and you feel really uncomfortable. You just want to placate him and just say what he wants to hear so that he'll stop. Just stay silent. And you'll notice, hey, at some point he's got to go to the toilet. At some point he wants to go home. He doesn't want to have this conversation forever. Can you outlast him? Just outlasting is bravery. Just staying in longer than you want to is bravery. This too shall pass. Similar to that is the statement, this is no worse than anything I've survived before. It is very, very rare that you're hitting a personal best with suffering. If you're an adult, your best suffering is probably behind you. It's probably in childhood, right? There is sometimes exceptions to that, but most of you have already had your worst moment in life, really. And in fact, future worst moments will just be a result of previous trauma. There's studies that show that guys who are PTSD from war actually also have trauma from childhood, and the war has kicked off that trauma. Guys who don't have trauma from childhood don't get PTSD from war. So this idea that this is the worst thing that ever happened to you, that's very unlikely. And everything else that's happened to you that's worse, you got through it. I don't mean that you successfully won the result you wanted, but you're here now watching this, so you got through it. You're going to get through this thing as well. I've been in times where I'm just struggling. I really struggle at airports, right? Some people are afraid of flying. I'm afraid of fucking airports. I've had so many things go wrong at airports. It's just a consequence of traveling a lot, just stacking up the odds, and I'm disorganized. So I get to airports and I'm just, oh, fucking here we go, But I think about times where I've missed flights, think about times where I've lost passports, think about times where I was detained by customs and didn't know if I was going to be let into the country or not. I think, well, all of those are behind me. I must have survived them. So whatever fucking going to happen at this airport is probably not going to be the worst experience I've ever had in an airport. It's certainly not going to be the worst experience I've ever had in my life. And so if it's anything less than what I've already been through, then I'm going to get through this too. Enough time will pass and I will be in a position again in the future where I'm not suffering. Another statement, just show up and do as much as you can, then bail. Or you might call this permission to quit. See, most of bravery is just showing up. As cheesy as that sounds, it's just getting to the gym. It's just starting the conversation with the stranger. It's just registering your business online. It's the little thing that got the process started. Fear is mostly about stopping the process from beginning. And one of the tricks that fear will do is make you think that once you've started, you can't stop. You're not allowed to quit. In fact, we get conditioned with this as children. It's bad to quit. Actually, it's fine to quit. In fact, you need the permission to quit in order to be brave. You need to know that you will bail when it gets too much, that you will not force yourself to endure too much or more than you can handle. So if you know, like, I'll just show up, take as much of it as I can handle, and then stop. Whatever amount of time that is brave moments. Let's say you're scared of going to your first dance class. Just show up to the dance class. You don't have to see it all the way through. You don't have to sign up to the 8-week course. Just dance as long as you can. And if it gets too much for you, you're allowed to make your excuses and bail. As long as you got that permission, then it's not so scary showing up. Knowing that you won't have to endure the whole thing, knowing that you're allowed to end it, knowing that you can register a business and then decide the next day, no, I'm going to stay an employee. You're allowed to do that, right? But make the decision after you've shown up. You might get to dance class and you get dancing like, this is all right. Okay, then stay to the end. But if you don't feel that way, then leave, because just showing up was a huge act of bravery. You've already made progress. Just start moving. This is a really important one for when you get frozen. And sometimes it means literally just physically move in some way, shape, or form. Do not sit still and allow your mind to just dominate your existence. Let's say you're scared of talking to a stranger. You're looking at them, you're starting to get all worked up in your mind, catastrophizing what might happen. You're just frozen on the spot. Just wake yourself up and go, move my feet. I don't care if I'm moving towards her or away from her or climbing the fucking ceiling. Get moving. Don't sit here and bathe in this fear. Any kind of movement in the direction that you want to be going. At this point, when you're already frozen with fear, it's going to be bravery points. Let's say you want that job promotion, but you just can't even think about doing it. You're just frozen there. At least open up the application, type your name in, like get some movement going with no kind of obligation to actually follow through on the whole thing. Just don't ever stay still. Don't stay frozen. Frozen's the worst place ever. It's better off to quit and move away completely than to freeze. This one may or may not help. It works for me. I tell myself, whatever damage is done, I'll fix it. A lot of bravery, like what I talk about with my clients, is this idea of make a mess and then clean it up. A lot of people are trying to get perfection going in their mind before they take an action. Of course, they never move. But if you're allowed to do it imperfectly, you're allowed to do it messy with just basic knowledge, then you'll actually get moving, you'll make progress. And one way to ensure this is to make a promise to yourself, look, if it does go wrong, if everything goes to shit, I'll fix it. All right, I'm good at fixing stuff. Let's say I go to ask out that girl and she's deeply offended. I'll apologize and I'll talk to her until it's fixed, and I'll fucking pay for her lunch if that's what makes up. I'll do whatever it takes to make up for any damage I may or may not do. Right? This promise to yourself that you'll try your best to fix it. Because you usually can fix stuff. You just forget when you're trying to be brave. You're like, oh, this big disaster will happen. Well, so what if it does? What will you do about that disaster? How will you fix it? Actually have that in mind as you start walking towards that potential disaster, right? Just okay, if it goes wrong, I'll fucking sort it out. Let's just see what happens. A lot of cowardice and a lot of anxiety comes from trying to get a result, trying to make something happen. If you switch into curiosity of like, let's just do an experiment, let's just see what happens. Any result's fine, I just want to know. That actually negates a lot of the fear, because a lot of the fear comes from the pressure to achieve the goal. You take the goal away, you take the pressure away, you take the fear away. So whenever you're trying to get a result and you're attached to outcomes and you're getting all panicky about it, just take the outcome away. Just go, you know what, let's just see what happens rather than trying to make something happen. I'll be proud of myself after. What you're looking to do with this statement is to put in your mind how you're going to feel about this later when it's all said and done, right? How you might feel about it tomorrow, or how you might feel about it 5 years from now. Like I've actually had the question earlier in the video, how can I make myself proud of myself tomorrow? You can actually tap into that feeling. So when you go to do the thing like, oh, I'm so scared of like telling my boss that I disagree with him, think, how will I feel after I've told him I've disagreed with him and the conversation's over and I'm back at my desk? How will I feel when I think about it tonight that I finally stood up for myself? And when that feeling comes up, move and act on it. And my final one, and this was a game changer for me, no matter what happens, it's better than a lifetime of cowardice. One of the things that really especially got me over my fear of rejection is that there's no rejection that's worse than a life not lived, than a thousand missed opportunities and wondering what if. The thing that used to haunt me the most, especially with girls and dating, is the amount of times that I did nothing and I'm not sure what would have happened. There is no rejection that's worse than that uncertainty, than lying awake at night like, fuck, I should have just said something to her. Thousands and thousands of opportunities down the toilet because I didn't act. At some point I thought, you know what? I'd rather hear no than have to guess what might have happened. One no is not as bad as lying awake at night, at least with the rejection or the bad consequence or whatever. I get to go home and go, fucking at least I tried. This is the guy I want to be. So it didn't go in my favor. At least I don't have to guess. And actually the result's no worse than if I had done nothing at all anyway. So of course, if you want help to become more courageous and you need more than just a few memes and notes to get through that, get in touch, dan@brojo.org, and I'll help you systematically build your courage over time. Thank you so much for listening to the whole podcast. I'll see you guys next time. Cheers.